Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of Intro to Sociology. Um, Sorry, first off, I just want to apologize for not being done with grading for the previous week's not quiz questions. I really had all intents of getting caught up last night, but I was so pooped after Easter because I don't know what happened, but Easter became like mini Christmas and we spent like so much. We have a 3 year old, as I probably mentioned, and a 6 months old. So 6 month old, they're kind of off the hook for now. But the 3 year old, I swear, he got like 4 Easter baskets this year. When I was a kid, I grew up in a very religious family. I feel like we never got anything. We got maybe some candy when we went out to stores and stuff like that. But now it's like, like I said, it's like mini Christmas, and mini Christmas plus mini Halloween with like all the candy sort of fused into one. So that was very mentally draining, and we did like an Easter egg hunt in the backyard. It was very nice, very special. I don't want to be like, that that dad that complains about all this stuff, but it takes a lot out of you, as the parents in the class probably know. So anyway, I promise hereby that by today, next couple days, I will be totally caught up in grading. I did glance over things; everything looks good. I just need to get through it. It won't take me very long. So we're going into week 4. There's kind of two things I want to mention. Obviously, about like this week's material. I want to make note that week five's material, the essay that's going to be due next week, is available for you to take a look at right now. I do have it opened, or it should be open. Oh, it's locked. Okay, so till the 13th. Okay. Well, I guess I'll change that because I want you to be able to look over it so that you can get your mind around it because it's due next week. And it's about 3 pages in length, is what I'm asking for. I want you to think about your social class history in your family, and I want you to think about the stuff that's covered in the material for that week. So just take a look over it. I'll make sure it's open after I record this video, just so you can take a look at it. That's not due till the following week, so I'll record stuff about that next week because I don't want to over inundate you with things to think about. So for this week's class, we are kind of moving into the topical, more focused topics of the class. This class, we're covering 2 topics, once again, as we kind of have to do for an 8-week class as opposed to a 15-week class. This is deviance and social control and government politics. I put these 2 things together because you may think, how does deviance relate to the government? Because if you really think about it, when laws are crafted and politics are kind of put together into a governing system for a society, really what you're doing or what they're doing, because I assume most of us in this class don't really have very much input into that besides voting, that they're kind of drawing the lines on what is acceptable in society. Things that will wind you up in jail, things that are promoted in society through tax breaks, through whatever it is. If you really think about it, our system of governing is in a lot of ways are deciding what we value in society. And in my PhD dissertation, I had a line that I came up with that I was very proud of. I think I wrote a lot about taxation, and I know people kind of roll their eyes when you think about taxes and stuff because I was writing about property taxes and tax foreclosure and demolition in the city of Detroit. But you can learn a lot about a society by the way that their taxes are structured. You can learn a lot about what they value as a society and how they think about ownership and how they think about, dispossession and things like that. And it's again, it's kind of the same thing with our laws, and you can think about what is or is not considered deviant by society. One could argue because if that thing is not permissible through the laws, that's a pretty big incentive for you not to do that thing, whether if it's like stealing or kind of some kind of fraud or whatever it may be. This is actually what was sort of my gateway into sociology. I was a long time ago when I was an undergrad, and I was an engineering student, and I hated what I was doing, but I felt like it was what I ought to be doing because I was working in like tech industry and stuff at the time. And the first class I took at Wayne State was called Deviants and Outsiders because I thought to myself, I was like, wow, that sounds like a very interesting class. I too consider myself a deviant and an outsider at times. And I think, probably all of us do, um, because it's just part of being a whole person, is, having these, feelings of feeling on the inside in some places and feeling on the outside in other places. And it was a very interesting class. It is, I would say probably what ended up keeping me in sociology as my major, and then on to grad school, and into doing a PhD, and then on to sitting in this basement where I live now and recording this video and teaching sociology to you all. Um, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think as you're going through the material, you will think of times that you have experienced that feeling of being considered deviant. Maybe you don't use a term, not that term, or some of the terms that are used in this chapter, but it is something I want you all to think about. Like, what do you consider deviant? And I think this week's not quiz question is, I ask, what are some things that your parents would have considered deviant for you growing up, and what are some things that your parents do that you or did when they were younger that you would consider as deviant um, behaviors? Because it changes a lot as time goes on. Like, one thing when I was growing up in the 90s, young people smoking was like pretty normal and like a pretty common thing. Like, I started smoking when I was like 17. No, I was probably even younger. I was probably like 16 maybe. I started smoking, and this was like in the late 90s, and it was like not a big deal. And I feel like now, and then I quit eventually. I quit smoking, gosh, many years ago now, almost 10 years ago now. Now it's like kids don't smoke, and it's great. It's really great. Just quitting smoking is the hardest thing I had to do in my life, and it's really great to not see kids. Like, if I go to Hart Plaza and see kids, like young kids skateboarding, or kids like hanging out in other places, you almost never see kids smoking. Even you almost never even see them vaping, which is also positive. But yeah, the hold of tobacco on young people is very different now, and I would argue that it is kind of considered deviant. That like smoking cigarettes as a young person is like not as this like cool thing as it was when I was growing up, and even for older people, it was like very common for young people to smoke. So it's just like one little example. I'm sure you probably have others of whatever through your life. So again, I think this material is very interesting. I think also in connection to government and politics, I think I this class isn't about like contemporary politics. I think people, including myself, have a lot of very strong opinions about what's going on in the political world right now. And I think it is fair to think from a sociological perspective, things that were once considered deviant behavior that are just totally normalized now. Like over the weekend, our president put on his social media a very expletive laden post about this war that is going on. And I feel like not that long ago, this would have been a scandal. And this is kind of pointing to this like relaxation of the pearl clutching around you know, uh, like decorum and the way that people communicate and things like that, for better or worse. I mean, this president, one way or another, is going to be out of office at a certain point, and this is changing the nature of the presidency, whether you like it or not. And it's something to really think about. That like these things. I was thinking back, like having lived through the Obama administration and all of these other, like as an adult, and thinking about the things that were like completely off the table and considered deviant from one perspective. Now would be like no one would even bat an eye. And like, what does that mean for the president that comes after this president, or the president after the president that comes after this president? And like, what does it look like 25 years from now? And these are just like interesting things to think about. I think is like how this concept of deviance is changing our like how our concept of deviance and the way it has evolved is changing in society, and how it's changing society and changing the way that our government is structured as well. If you think of other examples, like like when I was growing up, like in, again in the 90s, one of the first political things that I can remember is the vote for outlawing same-sex marriage in the state of Michigan. Like people really came out, and I guess this I was too young to vote, but I guess this would have been in like the Clinton presidential election, maybe, or George W. Bush or something, like the first George W. Bush or something like that. That like people in the state of Michigan voted to amend the state constitution to outlaw same-sex marriage. And this was, just like many other states, that this was the law of the land in the state of Michigan. And then fast forward, like not that long in the future. I mean, this was what in like 20s. I mean, it was 16, 8, 17, something like that. So I guess it's like 30-ish years, but not even 30. Yeah, I guess it's not even that. But whatever. But it's 20 some years. Um, Now same-sex marriage is legal everywhere in the country, and it's kind of head spinning when you think about it. Like I can't think of any other example of something that was like an amendment to a state constitution that was overturned by a Supreme Court decision. Like it's a pretty big sort of deal. And also, if you think about like the changing, really confusing too in some ways, views on abortion, the way that we had Roe v. Wade as like the sort of law of the land, and then Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then now we're seeing this like when you take the cap off of the abortion debate, so to speak, and allow people to actually voice their opinions, you see that overwhelmingly as a country, people are pro-choice, like some version of pro-choice. Where they don't want the government. If you to interpret that as being they don't want the government to tell women and people that give birth how to manage their pregnancies. And you see restrictions in some places, you see fewer restrictions in other places, but almost nowhere in the country do you see outright bans. I think it's just like in Texas and maybe like one other state or something. You see very, very few places, and I feel like in enough time, those are probably going to go away too, because I think it's just still very fluid and evolving. And I think that the message is that this country, by and large, I mean, we know through polling data and we know through like the way that people vote. Like, look in the state of Michigan, we amended the state constitution um, after Roe v. Wade was overturned. We amended the state constitution to enshrine abortion access in the state. And I feel like that was a big message. Because clearing that hurdle to amend the state constitution is not an easy thing to do. So anyway, these are just things to think about, like the relationship between like what is considered deviant in society, how does society exert control, and how do we as individuals exert control over our family, over our friend group by like, kind of having these like moments of disappointment, and that keeps somebody from doing like this or that thing that they may have done otherwise or something. And I don't know, I think it's a really interesting topic. Hi buddy, my 3-year-old Axel, come here, wants to make a little appearance. Come here, pal. This is Axel. Do you want to say what did the Easter Bunny? Well, I'm not actually talking to anybody. What did the Easter Bunny get you?
The Easter Bunny gave me a soul.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he gave you a lot of really good stuff. And we did. What did we do in the backyard?
We did
The egg hunt. Remember the egg hunt?
the egg.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Why we did the egg hunt?
Yeah, it was cool. The one we did inside and then we did in the backyard. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up. That was everything I wanted to say. Do you want to say bye to everybody? Bye
Bye.
bye, everybody. All right. See y'all. Have a good week. Take care.